What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I would like to discuss with you a heavyweight that fought in the 1970s. Very good fighter. He had a brother by the name of Mike Quarry, who was known for being knocked out with a bodacious left hook from light heavyweight champion Bob Foster. But Jerry Quarry was in there with the best of the best in his time in the 1970s. He would fight fighters such as Al Jones, Brian London, Alex Mitliff, Billy Daniels, Buster Mathis. He was in there with former champions such as Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali, and Smoking Joe Frazier. He would fight Levon Lyle, Eduardo Cortelli, Larry Middleton, Jimmy Ellis. And he was born May 15, 1945, Los Angeles, California. He died January 3, 1999, Los Angeles, California. He would have an amateur record for 107 wins, 13 losses, with 54 by the knockout route. He would have a professional record of 53 wins, 9 losses. He would be knocked out 4 times, and he would knock out 33 of his opponents. Now, Quarry knocked out a fighter by the name of Jack Bodell in 64 seconds in the very first round, and that would put him on the map. He would have his professional debut shortly after he won a Western Regional Golden Glove Champion and a National Golden Glove Championship. He would turn pro May 7, 1965 against Gene Hamilton in Los Angeles, and he would defeat him in 4 rounds. He would fight John Henry Jackson twice, Ray Ellis twice, and Ray Gear twice in 1965. He would have 14 fights that year. In 1966, he would have 10 fights, including a fight with Al Jones. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. Eddie Machem, he would lose to him in 10 rounds. 1967, he would face Al Jones once again. He would face Brian London, Alex Mitliff, Billy Daniels. On June 9th, he would face Floyd Patterson. October 28th, he would have a rematch with Floyd Patterson, but this time it would be for the WBA Heavyweight Championship elimination match. He would defeat him in 12 rounds. 1968, he would face Ted Spencer, February 3rd, and he would knock him out in 12 rounds in Oakland, California. April 27th, he would face Jimmy Ellis for the vacant WBA Heavyweight Championship strap, Oakland, California, and he would lose to him in 15 rounds. Now, Jimmy Ellis would be in line to face Smoking Joe Frazier. 1969, Jerry Quarry would face Buster Mathis, March 24th, Madison Square Garden, and he would defeat him in 12 rounds. June 23rd, Jimmy Ellis would be knocked out by Smoking Joe Frazier before this fight. And I'll tell you, this particular fight here was some fight. June 23rd, Joe Frazier would face Jerry Quarry, Madison Square Garden. He'd be knocked out in 7 rounds for the heavyweight championship strap. And I'll tell you, that was some fight. One of the best fights that year. Phenomenal fight between Smoking Joe Frazier and Jerry Quarry. Here I have a closed circuit program of that particular fight. One of the best fights of that year. Both men, toe to toe, every round. Until Smoking Joe's left hook would tell his toll. It would take his toll on Jerry Quarry. Now, Jerry Quarry would be stopped by George Cavallo, Madison Square Garden. 7 rounds, December 12th, 1969. 1970, March 19th, he would face George Foster in Los Angeles, California. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. June 17th, he would face Mac Foster, Madison Square Garden, and he would knock him out in 6 rounds. But on October 26th, he would face Muhammad Ali in Atlanta, Georgia, and he'd be knocked out in 3 rounds. Now, how Jerry Quarry would get this fight with Muhammad Ali would state to the boxing world that on September 11th, he had signed with Jerry Quarry. But Muhammad Ali would not be able to get a license in the state of New York or anywhere else for that matter, because he was suspended for not joining the Vietnam War. So Ali's conviction for the draft was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Ali won in a separate court of action. That case in New York from the State Athletic Commission, who refused to give Muhammad Ali a boxing license, was against the arbitration of that law. The commission did not appeal that particular ruling. So that allowed Muhammad Ali to go to a state that didn't have a commission. And he found Atlanta, Georgia. And that Jordan Corey and Muhammad Ali fight would be one for the ages. Because in that particular fight, the pimps came out that night. Everybody had 3/4 inches minks with the hat to match, 3/4 length. They were styling like you won't believe. You had Rolls Royces and OJs and Fleetwood Macs. Unbelievable. It was an outstanding night, that particular night. They would wear their snakeskin shoes and British Walkers and gator-skin Clarks and 4/4 length leather jackets. Unbelievable. Great night of boxing. 1971, he would have 4 fights. 1972, he would fight Eduardo Carletti, Los Angeles, and he would knock him out in 1 round on April 17th. May 9th, 1972, he would face Larry Middleton in London, and he would defeat him in 10 rounds. He would face Muhammad Ali in Las Vegas, and he'd be knocked out in 7 rounds on June 27th through the cuts. And the doctor would stop the fight. 1973, he would face Ron Lyle, Madison Square Garden, and he would defeat Ron Lyle in 12 rounds, February 9th of 1973. Now, Ron Lyle, we all know, had a war with George Foreman. He was in there with Muhammad Ali. He was also in there with Ernie Shavers. He was an outstanding fighter, was Ron Lyle. December 14th, he would face Ernie Shavers in Madison Square Garden. He would knock out Ernie Shavers in 1 round. And Don King was in the ring, and he couldn't believe it. Jerry Quarry still had it. 1974, June 17th, he would face Smoking Joe Frazier again in Madison Square Garden. This time he'd be knocked out in 5 rounds. Smoking Joe Frazier was a force to be reckoned with. He would face Ken Norton, Madison Square Garden, and he'd be knocked out by Ken Norton in the 5th round, 1974. And that would be about it for Jerry Quarry. But the fights that Jerry Quarry gave us would never be forgotten, right here on the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Salute to Jerry Quarry, who's an outstanding heavyweight. He was just in there at a time when you had some of the best heavyweights in his era. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Salute to my subscribers. Salute to Jerry Quarry.